Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as we talk about canna lilies. So let's go. I love canna lilies. They come in lots of different colors, lots of different heights, and their leaf structure can even be different. Some can be variegated, some can be different colors as well. Even though canna lilies are hardy in certain parts of the country, they are not hardy here where I live in New Hampshire, Zone 5B. Our winters can get very cold, down to negative 15 degrees Fahrenheit, which is too cold for these lilies to survive. So I can treat my canna lilies two ways. I can either treat them as annuals and throw them away every year, which I think is a shame and a waste, or I can lift the rhizomes each year and replant them, which might seem like a lot of work, but when it comes to saving money, it's a great way to not only keep your plant going year after year, but also to increase your stock in this plant. I recently received some canna lilies from a friend of mine, and in this video, I wanted to show you a few things. I want to show you how to collect the seeds from canna lily, how to divide your canna lily, and then how to prepare it for storage during the winter months. If you're going to overwinter your canna lily, you want to dig it up just after a frost has hit it. However, my friend and I dug it up a day before a frost hit it. I'm not too worried about that because the rhizomes have stored enough energy for the winter months and they're ready to go dormant at this point. In order to overwinter my plant, I could do it a number of ways. I could take the pot and I could put it in an area that stays cool, like my garage or my basement, and I could just let the plant be dormant in that pot. Or I could bring the plant in and treat it as a house plant. No matter how I do it, if I'm going to keep the plant in a pot, I want to make sure I'm treating the soil just to make sure there's no creepy crawly bugs that are in there. And you can treat the soil a number of different ways, but you want to make sure that you're not bringing in any bugs or insects into your home. I prefer to store my canna lily rhizomes as bare root. That's worked for me in the past, and that's the way I'm going to be storing my rhizomes this year. So let me show you my process for collecting the canna lily seeds. At the top of my canna lily, you can see all the different seed pods. I know that they're ready for me to collect the seeds because the first indication is that they're a brown color. I'm going to show you the next indicator that I look for. If I remove this seed pod right here, doesn't that look like a little bird? It has like two eyes and a little beak. That tells me that I can collect the seeds at this point. Notice that the seeds in there are a black color. If they were green, then I would not want to collect them. And if the seed pod was not open the way it is and it was a green color, I would want to wait until the seed pod turns to this light brown color. And to remove the seed from the seed pod, I can just open it up like this, and that's what the seed looks like. It's actually a pretty big seed. I'll be drying my seeds for about 1 week before I store them. I don't want to store them wet because they can rot. After I've dried them, I'm going to be storing them in these small Ziploc bags that measure 2 by 3 inches. They're a perfect size for seeds that I like to collect. However, you can store your seeds in a paper envelope, paper bag, some sort of a container or jar. The key is to make sure that your seeds are completely dry. I like to label the bag with the name of the plant, the color of the plant, which in this case it has red flowers, and the year that I collected the seeds. The reason I put the year on there is so that I know when I collected them, because seeds do lose their viability each year that goes by. And I put a US dime there for size reference so you can compare the size of the seed and bag next to the dime. I'll be making a video later this winter showing my process for starting these seeds indoors. When I'm referring to the bulbs at the bottom, they're called rhizomes, but I might use the word bulbs, rhizome, tuber, and I might use it interchangeably. I just want to throw that out there. But normally when we're talking about canna lilies, these are called rhizomes. My friend had dug these out for me already, but let's say you wanted to dig them out or pull them out of a pot. Just be careful. You want to make sure that when you're pulling or digging them out, that you're not hurting the rhizomes too much. And by mistake, if you did break it in half, it should be okay as long as each half has an eye on it. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove all the top leaves from the rhizomes because it'll make it easier for us to handle this. You can cut it down to about 6 inches from above the rhizome. I'm actually going to cut it down even more than that. And it's really up to you how much you want to leave. The reason that you would leave about 6 inches above the rhizome, it just makes it easier to handle it. And I'm just using hand pruners that are nice and sharp. When it comes to all this material, you can cut it into smaller pieces, and as long as it's not diseased, you can add this to your compost pile. Some people like to wash their rhizomes off before dividing them or before storage. I found that that's not necessary. I just like to brush off as much of the dirt as I can, and that's worked for me. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to knock off some of the soil that's on here. You'll notice that this has a nice white color on it. That's a good indicator that that's a healthy rhizome. If it was dark brown or if it was mushy feeling, then that's a rotten rhizome and you want to throw that away. But I can also feel that this feels nice and firm. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to remove the roots. It'll make it easier for storage, and also it'll make it easier for us to just see everything that we're working with here. Now that we've cleaned this up, I want to show you a close-up of what this rhizome looks like. See this right here? That is a growth point. And you could technically cut this off from the rest of the plant and you have one division there. You have another growth point over here, so we could cut that off as well. It's really up to you how small you want to make your cuts and how small you want your plants to be. In terms of how to cut these, you can do it a number of ways. You can yank or pull them off. You can use some sort of a knife, or you can use hand pruners. I'll be using hand pruners, and I'm just going to make my cut right here. Now notice this division has roots at the bottom of it. Let's say you made a division where you saw an eye, but it had no roots on it. Don't worry about that. It will produce roots next year for you. I'm making my divisions during the fall time. You really can make them any time of the year. You could even do them in the spring if you want. Here's another division right there. There, we just turned one plant into 1, 2, 3, 4 plants for next year. Now imagine if you were to go out and buy those, how expensive that would be. So I am ready to go for having 4 canna lily bulbs right there. But we have more to tackle over here. This one's falling right off. My friend had given me 2 plants. And so we are just turning those 2 plants into even more plants for next year, which is very exciting. With this piece here, you can see the new growth for next year. Same with this one over here. I had noticed at the end of the season, they were selling the canna lily bulbs in pots at a very discounted rate. So you might want to do the same thing. You might want to look at your local garden center, and they might be selling them on the clearance rack for a very cheap price. And all you need to do is overwinter them, especially if you live in an area where the canna lilies are not hardy. Right there, you can notice the eye for next year. With this one, you can see there's an eye over here and another one over here. So I can go ahead and make my cut. We turned that one plant into 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we have a total of 8 plants for next year. Okay, so let's talk about storing these. Like I mentioned, I will be storing them bare root, which means they are not planted in a pot. I'm not adding any water to them. They're just going to be the way they are, dry like that. And they're different than something like dahlia tubers. You really don't need to add any water to them during the winter months. However, if you do notice that they're starting to look shriveled, that they're looking very dry, you could give them a small spritz of water. But that's only if you're noticing that they're looking dry to you. But if they feel firm and they look fine, don't feel like you need to add any water. I will be checking them once a month. What I like to do is I like to put it on my calendar. You could put it on your phone also. And you're checking each month to make sure that they're not too dry, that they're not rotting. If they are rotting, you want to remove that rhizome because you don't want it to spread to the other rhizomes. I'll be storing them in a cardboard box. You could also store them in a paper bag. You don't want the rhizomes to be touching each other. In case one is rotting, you don't want it to spread to the other rhizomes. I like to add peat moss when I store them. You can also add sand, you could add vermiculite, you could add wood shavings, whatever you like. And the reason for that is just to retain some of the moisture for the rhizomes. However, I've heard some people not add anything. They just store them as is, and their rhizomes have survived just fine. I feel like gardening is an experiment, and you need to do what works for you. Maybe you have a method that is different than what I've suggested here. I'd love to hear from you. Please drop a comment down in the comment section below, because not only do I read your comments, but a lot of other people that are watching this video also are reading the comments. Please include your gardening zone and your location, because that's also very helpful. I'll be storing these in my garage. My garage does not freeze during the winter months, and the reason is 2 of the 4 walls are considered interior walls. So my garage usually hovers around 40 degrees Fahrenheit for the low. If for whatever reason we have an extremely cold winter, then what I can do is 2 things. I can either cover my boxed rhizomes with some sort of bubble wrap or a comforter, or I could add a space heater in my garage on the very few cold nights that we might have during the winter. Now, you might not have a garage where you can store these. You could also store them in your root cellar. You could store them in your basement. You just want to make sure that it's not too warm, because you don't want to wake up your rhizomes, especially if you're storing them bare root like I am. You want to make sure that they're sleeping, that they're in a dormant state. And then late winter, what I'll be doing is I'll be waking these rhizomes up, and I'll make a video showing you my process for doing that. Now, I'm not storing these quite yet. I'll be doing that in about a week. And the reason is I want these to dry out just a little bit, because they were just freshly dug up. And not only that, we just divided them. And since we divided them, we've basically opened them up, and we need them to cure a little bit. Otherwise, we're going to definitely introduce rot if we store them right now. But when I do store them, I'm going to put them in a cardboard box. They're going to be in a single layer, so they're not touching each other. And I'm going to surround them with peat moss. And then I'm going to seal up the box, but I'm not going to close the box 100%, because I want there to be a little bit of airflow, a little bit of circulation. So I'll be closing the box where it still is open on the top a tiny bit. I hope you found this video helpful. As always, if you have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear from you. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.